"Let go of that purse right now, you bastard!" I shouted, grabbing the arm of the young man who was trying to snatch the purse from an elderly woman right in front of the mansion where I was supposed to have dinner in 10 minutes. The boy couldn't have been more than 16, but he had enough muscle to knock that frail woman to the wet ground. She screamed for help as he pulled her faded brown purse with brutal force. Hey, stop that!" I yelled, running toward them. The kid looked at me for a second, calculating whether it was worth fighting me. My 6-foot height and my arms calloused from years of working as a carpenter must have weighed heavily in his decision, because he dropped the purse and ran down the dark street. "Are you okay?" I asked, helping her up and smoothing her clothes. She was shaking, but she smiled gratefully. "Thank you, dear. Thank you so much." That boy almost scared me to death. I looked at the imposing mansion behind us, with its perfectly manicured gardens and illuminated fountain. This was exactly where I should have been at that moment, finally meeting my girlfriend's parents after 8 months of dating. "Let me walk you to a safe place," I said, gently taking her arm. No, dear. I live just around the corner. I'll be fine." "You look like you're going somewhere important," she said, noticing my new dress shirt and the tie I had spent 20 minutes trying to tie perfectly. "My name is Ben, I'm 28 years old. And at that moment I had no idea that those 5 minutes defending a stranger in the rain would completely change the course of my life. I've been a carpenter for 7 years, since I left high school. I work with wood, building custom furniture for people who can afford quality and craftsmanship. I'm not rich, but I earn enough to support my sick mother and still have a little left over for myself." Amanda, my girlfriend, always said that her parents were traditional and needed time to get used to the idea of her dating someone without a college degree. Today was the day I would finally meet them. "Are you sure you don't need anything else?" I insisted, still worried about the old lady. "I'm sure, Angel." "God bless you for having such a kind heart," she replied, squeezing my hand with her small warm hands. "What's your name?" "Ben. Ben Matthews." "I'm Evelyn. Evelyn Grant," she said, smiling. My heart stopped for a second. Grant. The same last name as the family I was about to meet. Grant. I repeated, confused. "Yes, dear. This is my family's house. My son Robert and my daughter-in-law Patricia live here with my granddaughter Amanda." The world spun around me. The lady I had just helped was Amanda's grandmother. The grandmother she always said was traveling or too busy to meet me. "Amanda is your granddaughter?" I asked, feeling strange in my stomach. "Yes. My beautiful little granddaughter. She's been dating a young man for a few months, but I've never had a chance to meet him. I imagine he's a wonderful young man to have won her heart." I stood there in the rain, processing this information. Amanda had never mentioned that her grandmother lived in the same house as her parents. In fact, she always spoke of her as if she were a distant person, someone she rarely spoke to. "Do you know Amanda?" Evelyn asked, tilting her head curiously. Before I could answer, the front door of the mansion swung open. Amanda appeared in the doorway, wearing an elegant blue dress I had never seen before. "Ben. You're here," she shouted, but her expression changed completely when she saw Evelyn standing next to me. The smile vanished from her face instantly. "Grandma? What are you doing out here?" Evelyn looked confused. "A boy tried to steal my purse, dear. This kind young man helped me. What an incredible coincidence. He said his name is Ben, just like the boy you're dating." Amanda looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. It wasn't joy at seeing me. It was pure panic. "Ben," she said, her voice strangely tense, "these are my parents." A tall man in an expensive suit and an impeccably dressed woman appeared behind her. They looked at me, then at Evelyn, and something passed between the three of them that I couldn't quite decipher. "Mom," the man said to Evelyn, "why didn't you come in the back door like we agreed?" "Back entrance?" Evelyn looked down, embarrassed. "I was coming back from the pharmacy, son. I didn't think." "You didn't think," the woman said coldly. "You know we have important visitors today." I felt my blood boil. Important visitors? Were they treating their own mother like a servant? Amanda took my arm. "Ben, let's go inside. It's raining." But I didn't move. I looked at Evelyn, who now seemed small and humiliated among her own family. "Actually," I said, taking off my coat and putting it over the lady's shoulders. "I think I'll accompany Mrs. Evelyn until she's comfortable first." The look on Amanda's parents' faces could have cut glass. It was at that moment that I realized this night was not going to be anything like I had imagined. And if you're enjoying this story of shocking discoveries and family revelations, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what I would discover about this family in the next few hours would leave me completely speechless. Because sometimes, defending a stranger not only reveals who you really are, but also uncovers truths about people you thought you knew. "Actually, I think Mrs. Evelyn should go in through the front door," I said, helping her up the marble steps. "Especially considering that this is her house too." The silence that followed was as cold as the rain still falling on us. Robert Grant, Amanda's father, looked at me as if I had just spat on the Persian rug in the foyer. His calculating blue eyes measured me from head to toe, stopping at my wet shoes, my plain tie, my soaked coat that I had given to his wife. "Mr. Matthews," he said, pronouncing my last name as if it were a dirty word, "I imagine Amanda hasn't explained how our family works." Patricia Grant, his wife, remained silent, but her gaze spoke volumes. She wore a dress that probably cost more than my 3-month salary, and every pearl on her necklace seemed to judge me individually. "Dad," Amanda whispered, clearly embarrassed, "maybe we should go inside and—" "No," Robert interrupted her, without taking his eyes off me. "I think Mr. Matthews needs to understand a few things before he enters our home." I felt Evelyn tremble beside me. Not from the cold, but from humiliation. A woman in her 70s, being treated like an embarrassment in front of her own family. "With all due respect, Mr. Grant," I replied, keeping my voice steady, "the only thing I need to understand is why you treat your mother as if she's a problem to be hidden away." Robert's face turned red. Patricia finally spoke, her voice cutting like ice. "Robert's mother has special needs. She gets confused sometimes, forgets the rules of society. It's better for everyone when she has her own routine, her own space." I looked at Evelyn. Her eyes were downcast, but she didn't look confused. She looked ashamed. Broken. "What kind of rules of society?" I asked. "The kind you clearly don't know," Patricia replied coldly. "This is a respectable home. We have neighbors, a reputation to uphold. We can't have uncomfortable situations." Amanda tugged at my arm. "Ben, please. Let's just go inside and have dinner. We can talk about this later." But I couldn't move. I couldn't just ignore what I was seeing. "Uncomfortable situations," I repeated slowly. "Like your mother almost getting mugged at her front door?" "She shouldn't be out on the street at this time of night," Robert said sharply. "We've told her 1,000 times. She has a caregiver, she has specific times she's allowed out. But she insists on disobeying." "I just went to the pharmacy to get my medicine," Evelyn murmured, her voice barely audible. "See." Patricia sighed dramatically. She could have asked Maria to get it. Or waited until tomorrow. But no, she has to be stubborn and go out in the middle of a storm. Something inside me broke at that moment. Maybe it was the way Evelyn shrank even more, or the way Amanda looked away, embarrassed, but not of her parents, of me. "Stubborn," I repeated, my voice rising. "She's 70 years old and she went to get her medicine. That's not stubborn, that's independence." "Independence that almost killed her today," Robert retorted. "If you hadn't shown up." "If I hadn't shown up, you wouldn't even have known anything had happened to her, would you?" The question came out sharper than I intended. "Because you keep her hidden away like she's a prisoner in her own home." The silence returned, but this time it was charged with a tension that made the air seem thick. It was Amanda who broke the silence. "Ben, you don't understand. Grandma has episodes. She gets confused, says strange things to visitors. It's embarrassing." "Embarrassing." The word echoed in my head like a gunshot. "Embarrassing," I repeated, looking at the woman I had just met but already respected more than any of the other three. "Your grandmother is embarrassing." "That's not what she meant," Robert tried to smooth things over, but it was too late. "That's exactly what she meant," I replied. "You're ashamed of your own mother. Of your own grandmother." Evelyn touched my arm gently. "Ben dear, they're right. I sometimes forget things, I talk too much." "No," I said firmly, covering her hand with mine. "You've done nothing wrong. Never." Patricia sighed impatiently. Mr. Matthews, you clearly come from a different background, where things are simpler. But our family has certain social responsibilities, certain images to uphold. Images, I repeated, feeling a cold anger spreading through my chest. Yes, Robert agreed. Images that you don't seem to understand. Amanda mentioned that you work with your hands. The way he said works with his hands made it sound like I dug ditches for a living. I'm a cabinet maker, I said proudly. I make custom furniture for people who value quality and craftsmanship. How charming, Patricia murmured, exchanging a glance with her husband. Amanda finally found her voice again. Ben, maybe we should reschedule this dinner. Maybe when you're more prepared to understand our family situation. More prepared. The question came out as a dangerous whisper. Prepared to accept that not everyone has the same background as you, she explained, her voice sounding exactly like her mother's now. Some families have traditions, expectations. It was at that moment that I truly understood what was happening. This wasn't just about Evelyn. It was about me. It was about us. They weren't just hiding Robert's mother from important visitors. They were testing me. Seeing if I was the kind of person who would stay quiet while they treated someone like trash. Seeing if I would accept my place in their social hierarchy. And Amanda. Amanda was hoping I would pass their test. Hoping I would choose her over my own conscience. You know what's funny? I said, my voice strangely calm. I came here tonight nervous. Worried that you wouldn't accept me. That I wouldn't be good enough for your daughter. I paused, looking each of them in the eye. But now I realize I asked the wrong question. The question isn't whether I'm good enough for you. I held Evelyn's hand more tightly. The question is whether you're good enough to deserve a woman like this. And based on what I've seen today. I left the sentence hanging, loaded with all the implications they were smart enough to understand. Robert took a step forward, his posture becoming threatening. Listen here, young man. You may impress my daughter with your cheap gentlemanly gestures, but you don't impress me. I know your type. You come from nothing, see an opportunity to get ahead in life, and you grab at any chance you can. Dad. Amanda exclaimed, but he continued. You think saving my mother from some punk is going to win us over? Make us forget that you're a craftsman who probably never owned a decent suit until you met my daughter. Robert, Patricia murmured, but there was approval in her voice. No, he said, raising his hand. It's time to speak plainly. My daughter went to a prestigious university. She has an MBA from Harvard. She could marry lawyers, doctors, executives. And instead she chooses a carpenter. Every word was calculated to cut, to diminish, to put me in my place. But the strange thing was, the more he talked, the calmer I became. Because I was finally seeing these people for who they really were. Are you done? I asked when he paused. Ben, Amanda started, but I raised my hand. No, let him finish. I want to hear everything. Robert smiled smugly. I want you to understand that despite your humble origins, we are willing to accept this relationship, as long as you understand certain realities. What realities? That you will never truly be part of this family. That you will always be tolerated, never accepted. That when Amanda tires of this phase of late teenage rebellion, she will find someone more her own level. Patricia nodded. And that, in the meantime, you will behave according to our standards. No scenes like this today. No questioning how we run our family. I looked at Amanda, waiting for her to say something. Anything. But she just stood there, silent, biting her lower lip. That's when I realized she wasn't shocked by her parents' behavior. She was waiting for my response. Waiting to see if I would accept their terms. I understand, I finally said. Robert smiled, thinking he had one. I understand perfectly who you are, I continued, my voice growing stronger. And I understand that I could never be part of a family that treats its own matriarch like an inconvenient pet. I turned to Evelyn, who was still holding my hand. Mrs. Evelyn, would you like me to drive you to your pharmacy tomorrow? To make sure you get your medicine safely. Her eyes filled with tears. You would do that? I would be proud to, I replied. And if you need anything, anything at all, here's my card. I took one of my business cards from my pocket and placed it in her hand. Ben, Amanda said, her voice finally breaking, you can't leave like this. Of course I can, I replied, taking my coat off Evelyn's shoulders and putting it back on. Your family made it very clear where you belong. And I don't belong here. I started down the steps, but stopped and turned around one last time. Oh, and Amanda? Next time you meet someone who works with their hands, remember one thing. These hands build things that last. Things that have real value. Not like these empty facades you spend your lives maintaining. I looked at Evelyn one last time. See you tomorrow, Mrs. Evelyn. What time do you usually leave for the pharmacy? At 2 in the afternoon, dear, she whispered. I'll be here at 1:45. And with that, I walked away from the mansion, leaving behind not only Amanda, but a whole life I thought I wanted. What I didn't know at the time was that Evelyn Grant had secrets about her own family. Secrets that would change everything I thought I knew about the Grants. And that my decision to defend a stranger in the rain was about to reveal a truth that would shake the foundations of their arrogance forever. The next morning, I woke up with a strange feeling in my chest. I couldn't stop thinking about how Evelyn had shrunk in front of her own family. I arrived at the Grant mansion at 1:45, 15 minutes before our appointment. Evelyn was already waiting on the side porch, away from the main entrance. She was wearing the same beige coat as yesterday and carrying a small purse. Ben, dear, she said, her face lighting up when she saw me. I didn't think you'd really come. I promised I would, I replied, offering her my arm. How did you sleep? She hesitated. Well, actually, Robert said I shouldn't bother you today. That you probably wouldn't come. I felt that familiar anger rising in my chest. He said that. He said you were just being polite yesterday. That men in your position don't usually keep that kind of promise. Men in my position. Robert's words echoed in my mouth like poison. Mrs. Evelyn, may I ask you a personal question? Of course, dear. Have you always lived with them? She sighed as we walked down the sidewalk. No, Ben. I had my own house until 3 years ago. A lovely little house in the center of town, near the church I've been going to for 40 years. What happened? Robert said it was dangerous for a woman of my age to live alone. That I was getting forgetful, that I might leave the gas on or fall down the stairs. Her voice grew quieter. He insisted so much that I finally agreed to sell the house and move here. And the money from the sale? Robert took care of everything. He said he invested it for me, that I get a small monthly allowance for my basic needs. We stopped at a traffic light and I looked at her. Small allowance? $200 a month, she whispered, as if it were a shameful secret. For medicine, personal items, anything I need. My mind began to process the numbers. A house in the center of town was worth at least $300,000. Even invested conservatively, it should yield at least $2,000 a month. Mrs. Evelyn, how much was your house worth when you sold it? Robert said he got $450,000 for her. He said I was lucky, that the market was hot. $450,000, and she was getting $200 a month. Something was very wrong. What about your medications? Your doctors? Oh, Robert picked a cheaper doctor for me. He said the old one was too expensive, that he was ripping me off. She stopped walking. But Ben, sometimes I feel like I'm not getting the care I need. What do you mean? My previous cardiologist said I needed a specific medication for my heart. Very expensive. The new doctor said a generic drug would do the same thing. She touched her chest. But lately I've been having pains I didn't have before. We arrived at the pharmacy, and I watched as she asked for her medications. The pharmacist frowned when he saw the prescription. Mrs. Grant, this medication, he began, but Evelyn quickly interrupted him. It's fine, it's what the doctor prescribed. I paid for the medications, ignoring her protests, and we left. On the way back, I asked more questions. Mrs. Evelyn, do you go out alone other times? Not much. Robert says it's dangerous. And Patricia? Well, she gets nervous when she doesn't know where I am. Nervous why? She says I might say things. Inappropriate things. that I might embarrass the family. We stopped at a bench in the square, away from the mansion. What kind of inappropriate things? Evelyn looked around, as if someone might be listening. Well, sometimes I mention how things used to be. How Robert used to be different when he was a child. How he changed after he married Patricia. Changed how? He was a sweet boy, you know. He always looked after me when his father worked late. But after the wedding, he started seeing money and status as the only things that mattered. Her hands trembled slightly, and Patricia always made it clear that I was a burden. My phone rang. It was Amanda. Ben, where are you? Taking your grandmother to get her medicine, like I promised. I need to talk to you. Can you come over when you're done? Why? Just, please. It's important. I hung up and looked at Evelyn. Your granddaughter wants to talk to me. She's a good girl, Ben. Just influenced by her parents. When we got back to the mansion, Amanda was waiting at the side entrance. She looked nervous, constantly fixing her hair. Grandma, can you come in? Mom wants to talk to you about dinner tonight. Evelyn nodded and went inside, leaving Amanda and me alone. Ben, about yesterday, she began. There's nothing to discuss, Amanda. Yes, there is. You don't understand what my parents are like. They have high standards, expectations. Expectations that you treat an old woman like a prisoner? She's not a prisoner. She's cared for, protected. With $200 a month of her own money? Amanda turned pale. How do you know about that? She told me. $450,000 from her house, and you give her $200 a month as if it were charity. It's not like that. There are expenses, investments. What investments, Amanda? Where are the statements? Does she have access to her own money? Ben, you're complicating a situation you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You stole her independence, you control every penny, you chose cheap doctors to save money on her treatment, and you still make her feel guilty for existing. Amanda crossed her arms. My parents saved her from herself. Elderly people can't make these kinds of decisions on their own. Decision? She's perfectly lucid. You spent an hour with her. We've lived with her for years. I looked at Amanda, really seeing her for the first time. The coldness in her eyes, the way she talked about her own grandmother as if she were an administrative problem. You know what's funny, Amanda? Yesterday, I thought your parents were the problem. That maybe you were different. I am different. No, you're not. You're just like them. The only difference is that you're 26 and they're 50. But the cruelty? The greed? It's exactly the same. I turned to leave, but she grabbed my arm. Ben, if you really care about her, you'll understand that sometimes love means making difficult decisions. You're right, I replied, looking her straight in the eye. Sometimes love means making very difficult decisions. I walked away, but not home. I walked straight to my truck and called my lawyer. Steve? It's Ben. I need information on financial abuse of the elderly and how to document medical negligence. Because Amanda was right about one thing. Sometimes love means making difficult decisions. And I had just decided that Evelyn Grant deserved so much more than a family that treated her like a bad investment. As I drove home, a single question echoed in my mind. How many other secrets did the Grants hide? And how far would they go to protect their perfect image when they found out that someone had finally decided to fight for Evelyn? 3 days after my conversation with my lawyer, I had a folder with 15 pages of notes and a list of contacts that could completely change Evelyn Grant's life. Steve Rodriguez wasn't just my lawyer, he was my friend since high school. When I explained Evelyn's situation, he didn't hesitate to offer his help pro bono. Ben, cases of financial abuse of the elderly are more common than you think, he said, leafing through the documents I had brought him. But we need solid evidence. Recorded conversations, bank statements, medical records. How do we get that? Legally? Evelyn needs to request the information herself. She has every right to her own financial and medical records. That's when I had my first truly diabolical idea. The next morning, I called Evelyn. Mrs. Evelyn, would you like me to accompany you to a doctor's appointment today? Oh Ben dear, I don't have an appointment. Actually, I thought we could get a second opinion. About those chest pains you mentioned. There was a long pause. Robert wouldn't like that. Robert doesn't need to know yet. It's just a consultation for your peace of mind. 2 hours later, I was sitting in the waiting room of the cardiology clinic, watching Evelyn talk to Dr. Michael Chun, a renowned cardiologist Steve had recommended. When she came out of the consultation, she was pale. Ben, the doctor said that my current medication is inadequate for my condition. Inadequate how? He said that with my heart history, I should be taking a much stronger medication. What I'm taking is practically a placebo. I felt that familiar anger rising, but I kept my voice calm. Can the doctor document that? He already has. He said he'd like to see my previous tests to compare. And where are your previous tests? Robert keeps everything. He says it's for my safety. I made a mental note, total control over medical records. Mrs. Evelyn, do you remember the name of your previous cardiologist? Before you moved in with Robert. Dr. Harrison. He treated me for 15 years. Her eyes filled with tears. I missed seeing him. He always explained everything, made me feel cared for. Let's go see him. Dr. Harrison was a man in his 60s with kind eyes and an impressive memory. When I mentioned Evelyn's name, his face lit up. Evelyn Grant. How is she? I was worried when she stopped coming in. Actually, doctor, I'm here because I'm worried about her too. I explained the situation, the new doctor, the wrong medication, the chest pains. Dr. Harrison grew more serious. Mr. Matthews, Evelyn has a serious but manageable heart condition. With the right medication, she could live a completely normal life for many years. He paused. Without the right medication. How long? Maybe 2 years. Maybe less. The silence in the room was deafening. Doctor, can you document what medication she should be taking? And perhaps explain the consequences of not receiving proper treatment? Of course. In fact, I'll do better than that. I'll contact the medical board about her current treatment. As we drove back, Evelyn was quiet. Finally, she spoke. Ben, why would Robert do this to me? It was the question I had been dreading. Because the answer was too cruel for a mother to accept. Mrs. Evelyn, I need to ask you something very sensitive. Do you have a will? Yes, I do. Robert helped me make one 2 years ago. And in that will, I leave everything to him and Patricia. They are my only family. Everything. The $450,000 pension from the house, any remaining cash, probably even life insurance. Would you like to see a copy of your will? Just to look it over. Robert said not to worry about the details. More control. More isolation. That night, I made more calls. To the bank where Evelyn had kept an account before she moved. To her old church. To neighbors of the house she had sold. The picture that emerged was devastating. Evelyn was not a confused old woman who needed protection. She was an independent woman, active in her community, with close friends and a rich social life. Until 3 years ago. She just disappeared, said Martha, a former neighbor. One day she was here, attending knitting class, helping with the church bazaar. The next day the house was empty. We asked her son, added Dorothy, another neighbor. He said she was sick, that she needed special care. But she always seemed so healthy. By the end of the week, I had a complete dossier, evidence of intentional medical neglect, documentation of forced social isolation, financial records showing extremely limited access to her own money, and witnesses to Evelyn's normal personality and abilities prior to the move. If you're following this journey of shocking discoveries and wondering how a family could be so cruel, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what I found out about the Grants' real motives will leave you speechless. But I still needed one thing, direct evidence of their bad faith. That's when I had my second diabolical idea. I called Amanda. Ben. She sounded surprised. I wasn't expecting to hear from you. Amanda, I've been thinking about what you said. About making difficult decisions for love. And I think you were right. Maybe I've been too hard on your family. I could hear the relief in her voice. Oh Ben, I'm so glad you understand. Actually, I'd like to apologize. To your parents. And to you. Really? Really? How about dinner tomorrow? At your place again? She almost squealed with delight. Sure. I'll let my parents know. They'll be so relieved. I hung up the phone and looked at the small digital recorder Steve had lent me. Professional equipment, he had explained. Perfect audio quality, completely discreet. Because sometimes, to protect the innocent, you have to let the guilty condemn themselves with their own words. And the next day, I would find out exactly how far the Grants were willing to go to keep their dirty secret hidden. What they didn't know was that every word they said would be recorded. And that those recordings wouldn't just be evidence for a court of law. They would be the key to giving Evelyn back not just her freedom, but her dignity. The dinner at the Grant mansion on Friday night began exactly as I had planned. Amanda greeted me at the door with a radiant smile, wearing a blue dress I had never seen before. Ben, I'm so glad you changed your mind about us. Sometimes it takes time to see things clearly, I replied, discreetly activating the recorder in my coat's inside pocket. Robert and Patricia were in the living room, drinking expensive wine and talking about a new property they were considering buying in Martha's Vineyard. Ben, Robert said, standing up with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I'm glad you've come to your senses. Actually, I came here to apologize, I said, accepting the glass of wine Patricia offered me. I acted impulsively last week. Young men are sometimes passionate, Patricia said condescendingly. The important thing is that you understand your place. My place. The words echoed around the room as we sat down to dinner. Where's Mrs. Evelyn? I asked casually. Mother is resting, Robert replied quickly. She gets confused at night. Oh, that's too bad. I really liked her. Amanda laughed. Ben, you spent literally an hour with her. You don't really know her. You're right, I agreed. But sometimes an hour is enough to see a person's character. During dinner, I let them talk. And talk they did. The truth is, taking care of the elderly is a burden, Patricia said, cutting into her steak. Especially when they become stubborn and unreasonable. Exactly, Robert agreed. My mother has always been stubborn. When she was younger, it was charming. But now? It's just inconvenient. And expensive, Amanda added. The medications she insists she needs cost a fortune. That's why we switched to a more practical doctor, Robert said. Someone who understands that we don't always need the most expensive treatments for conditions that are, frankly, inevitable. Inevitable. They were talking about letting a woman die to save money. But what about her house? I asked. Doesn't that help with the costs? The three of them exchanged glances. Ben, Patricia said slowly, these are complex family issues. Actually, Robert interrupted, since you seem to be becoming part of the family, you should know. The money from the house is invested. We generate a small but steady income for her basic needs. $200 a month, I said. The silence in the room was deafening. How do you know that? Amanda asked, her voice suddenly cold. She told me. $450,000 for the house, and you give her $200 a month. It's not that simple, Robert said, standing up. There are management fees, housing costs, food. Of course, I agreed. And I imagine you document all of these costs meticulously. Obviously, Patricia said. Great. I'm sure the state will be impressed with your financial transparency. Amanda dropped her fork. The state? Yes. I'm reporting suspected financial abuse of the elderly on Monday. Robert laughed loudly. With what evidence? The word of a senile woman against ours. I took the tape recorder out of my pocket and placed it on the table. With the evidence of you admitting everything. Robert's face turned white. You can't record private conversations without permission. Actually, I can. The state allows recording of one side as long as one of the participants consents. And I consent. Patricia stood up abruptly. You little. Careful, I warned. Anything you say now is also being recorded. Amanda was looking at me as if she had never seen me before. Ben, what do you want? Money. I want justice for your grandmother. and complete transparency about her finances. And if we don't? Robert asked. I smiled and took out my phone. Then this recording goes to the Department of Social Services, to the State Medical Board, to the FBI, because financial abuse of the elderly that crosses state lines is a federal crime, and to Channel 7 News. You wouldn't do that, Patricia whispered. Mrs. Patricia, I literally heard you admit that you are denying proper medical treatment to a 70-year-old woman to save money. Of course I would. Robert tried one last play. No one will believe you. We are a respected family in this community. You're right, I agreed. That's why I brought more than just recordings. I took a folder out of my bag. Dr. Harrison's medical records showing the treatment she should be receiving. Dr. Chen's opinion confirming medical negligence. Statements from former neighbors about Evelyn's personality and normal abilities before she moved here. I opened the folder and spread the documents on the table. Bank statements showing that your investments yield much more than $200 a month. And here, I took out a copy of the will you had her sign, leaving everything to you. Amanda was crying now. Ben, please. We can work this out. You sure can, I agreed. Here are my conditions. I pulled a sheet of paper from the folder. First, Evelyn receives immediate medical treatment from Dr. Chun or another qualified cardiologist of her choice. Second, she receives full access to her own money, with detailed monthly statements of all investments. Third, she can live wherever she wants, here in her own home again, or anywhere else she chooses. Fourth, you undergo mandatory family therapy for at least 6 months. Robert was red with anger. And if we refuse? Then on Monday morning, this entire file goes to the authorities. And you will face criminal charges of elder abuse, medical neglect, and financial fraud. Patricia began to cry. You're destroying our family. No, I replied, putting the documents away. I'm saving a family member you were slowly killing. That's when we heard footsteps on the stairs. Evelyn came down, wearing a simple robe, her gray hair loose on her shoulders. She had heard everything. Ben dear, she said softly, thank you. Robert tried one last desperate move. Mom, you don't understand. He's trying to blackmail us. Evelyn looked at her son with a deep sadness that cut my heart. Robert, I understand perfectly. And for the first time in 3 years, I have hope. She turned to me. Ben, I accept your conditions. All of them. Amanda stood up abruptly. Grandma, you can't do this. We take care of you. Honey, Evelyn said gently, taking care means wanting the best for someone. You wanted what was convenient for you. I looked at the 3 Grants, seeing the realization sink in on their faces. The era of controlling and manipulating Evelyn was over. You have until Sunday night to decide, I said, standing up. Accept the conditions, or face the consequences. I took Evelyn's hand. Mrs. Evelyn, would you like me to go with you to pack a few things? I thought you might want to spend a few days somewhere more comfortable while you think about where you'd like to live. His eyes lit up. I'd love to, dear. As we left the dining room together, I heard Patricia whisper to Robert, how did this happen? How did we lose control? The answer was simple. They had underestimated the power of someone who truly cared about Evelyn Grant. And now, for the first time in 3 years, she was about to regain not only her freedom, but her dignity. But the real surprise was yet to come. Because on Sunday night, when the Grants called to accept my terms, Evelyn had one last revelation that would change everything forever. On Sunday night, the phone rang at exactly 8 o'clock. We accept, Robert said, his voice defeated. All the terms? I asked. All of them. On Monday morning, I accompanied Evelyn to her appointment with Dr. Chun. 2 hours later, she had the correct prescription in her hands and tears of relief in her eyes. Ben dear, I have something to tell you, she said as we left the clinic. What is it, Mrs. Evelyn? Do you remember when I mentioned that Robert took care of selling my house? Yes. Well, he lied about the price. It wasn't $450,000. She paused, smiling. It was $800,000. I stopped walking. $800,000. And the will they made me sign? It's not valid. I had another one drawn up by my original lawyer 3 months before I moved, leaving everything to a foundation for the protection of the elderly. I started laughing. Evelyn had played their game better than they had. When will Robert and Patricia find out? When I die. Or, she smiled mischievously, when I decide to tell them. 6 months later, Evelyn was living in a beautiful home near her old church, surrounded by friends and actively involved in the community. Robert and Patricia were facing a federal investigation for financial abuse of the elderly. Amanda? She moved to another state after the scandal hit the local newspapers. As for me, I discovered my true purpose, legal advocate for the elderly. Steve and I opened a law office specializing in abuse cases, funded by a very generous anonymous donation. The last time I saw Robert Grant, he was leaving court after being sentenced to 3 years in prison and full restitution. When our eyes met, he looked away first. Last week, Evelyn introduced me as my grandson at heart to her friends at church. In that moment, I realized that family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up when you need the most. If this story of redemption and justice touched your heart, subscribe to the channel because there will always be people willing to fight for the forgotten, and their victories deserve to be celebrated. Sometimes standing up for a stranger doesn't just save a life. Sometimes it saves two.